Toastmasters members and guests. Today, I would like to talk about what are the impacts of the drought to state economy, environment, as well as health. Let me tell you something about drought. What happens when there is a drought? Of course, we know surface water resources will decline. When surface water resources will decline, the storage level in our reservoir and lakes goes down. Then those power plants, hydropower plants, which rely on those surface water resources, they need to cut the supply of hydropower, electricity. When that happens, there is a deficit of power supply into the market. Then that deficit has to be substituted by other means, such as through the use of coal power, nuclear power plant. When that happens, in one hand, people they have to pay extra price to buy the same energy from the energy supplier, and on the other hand, additional release of carbon dioxide gas goes into the atmosphere, due to which we have problem of global warming and climate change. And other examples of the drought, we see clearly that all those recreational industries, such as tourism business, boating industries, fishing industries, have been impacted directly due to the drought. People who rely on them or those industries are getting laid off. And due to this, state is getting less revenue because those industries are cutting the job and as well as they are reducing the business. Therefore, revenue is going down. Not only that, water supplies and water suppliers and water purveyors, they cut the water supply to the recreational areas such as parks, golf courses, and lawns. Because of that, people will have less tendency of visiting to those areas. When that happens, of course, less physical activity. When less physical activity happens, there is a chances of having overweight issues, obesity issues, rise in cholesterol level. Then more frequent health hospital visits. So eventually, healthcare cost goes up. See how drought impacts in a different angles and into different areas. Likewise, not only we are impacted by the drought, but other organisms like wildlife habitats, aquatic organisms, amphibians, those are equally affected because surface water resources declines. That means habitat for those organisms is basically being compromised. In one hand, these organisms, they need to fight among themselves for their survivals, for the food. And what happens into this food chain, certain members of these food chains get affected, means other members are also equally affected. That means that impact goes into us eventually. So this is how drought has impact in a long run. And other examples of the drought, you can clearly see water suppliers and water purveyors, they are cutting our water supply for the residential areas. And we are in our conservation mode. When we are in the conservation mode, we try to save water. What does that mean? That means we are compromising the hygienic issue in our indoor areas. Then there is a chances of spreading infectious disease among the family members. That means basically healthcare will go up again. Likewise, into the outdoor areas, when there is a less water supply into our outdoor areas, that means we will have less greenery vegetation. That means we will be getting less clean air. And that is the impact to our health. Not only with that, you can clearly see how drought has impact into the groundwater resources. Of course, we know during drought time, there will be less and less recharge into the groundwater resources in one hand. The other hand, some industries like farming industries, farmers, they have to rely on groundwater resources for their deficit of their surface water supply in order to survive or in order to produce the food. When that activity goes on, in one hand, there are issues of land subsidence. So land subsidence will have eventual impact into the state economy. How? You see, there's lots of cracks into the foundations. land subsidence into the roads, bridges, buildings, canals, dams, then the state has to allocate additional fund to maintain those land subsidence related issues. So you can clearly see how we have been impacted by the drought. On the other hand, what happens when there is a land subsidence? The storage level of this aquifer will go down. So eventually we'll have less and less clean groundwater resources. On the other hand, there will be high intrusion of those salty water resources into the groundwater. That will have further impact into the available groundwater resources as well. And other impact, you can clearly see those vegetations and greenery, those forests. What happens? They rely on the groundwater resources for their water supply through the root. When groundwater level goes down, there is a fierce competition among those trees by themselves to obtain water resources for their survival. In one way, the normal growth pattern of the tree will get reduced. There will be reduction in the vegetation patterns. Then there is a fire hazards issue, much more frequent fire hazards. And then the state has to allocate additional fund to fight with the fires. Look, when there is a fire, the watershed will be totally impacted, and during the extreme precipitation events, high problem of sedimentation in erosion. When there is sedimentation in the erosion, water quality will go down of our rivers and lakes. Eventually with the impact to other organisms, other living beings. Not only with that, the problem with the reservoirs and lakes, the storage capacity of the reservoir and lakes will also go down because of the sedimentation and erosion. So this is how drought has impact not only in a one way, in a multiple way, and not only to human beings, but to other organisms as well. So, in fact, drought has far worse economic consequences than any other natural disasters like flood, earthquake, and tsunami. Therefore, drought is considered to be as a slow poison for the state. Thank you.
We can get 1 minute timer for members to give their small evaluation of Ramesh's speech. Okay, we're going to move on to our second speaker of the day, and I have a introduction for our second speaker. I'll just basically read this verbatim. Alan is doing Project 2, Interpreting Poetry from the Interpretive Reading Advanced Manual. Poetry can be difficult to interpret because a poet often relies on symbolism, imagery, and suggestions to convey the message instead of clear description. The objectives of this project are to understand the difference between poetry and prose, to recognize how poets use imagery, rhythm, meter, cadence, rhyme to convey the meaning and emotion of their poetry. Secondly, identify the poem's general purpose, then break down the poem into stanzas or sentences and determine the thoughts expressed in each. Poetry makes greater use of rhythm, meter, cadence, and rhyme than prose. To apply vocal techniques that will aid in the effectiveness of the reading. Please help me welcome Alan to read Tennyson's Ulysses.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Hello, Toastmasters and guests. This is a different kind of project, but I think we're going to have some fun with it. The adventures of Odysseus were first captured by Homer's epic work called the Iliad and the Odyssey back in, I think, between 700 and 800 BC. And Tennyson decided to use